Шановні пані та панове, радий вітати всіх учасників форуму.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to welcome all the participants of this forum and the speakers and the participants online, and the topic of the forum today is sustainable development and green finance reconstruction of Ukrainian cities. The forum is organized by the Association of Cities of Ukraine and Interstate Consultants Engineers Guild, and I'm representing the International Interstate Consultants Engineers Guild. So we are aware that the Russian army has significantly damaged the infrastructure in Ukraine, a lot of administrative buildings and social infrastructure and other important objects of critical infrastructure are being destroyed and devastated, and the damage inflicted to the cities are totaling in billions, and the war is ongoing. And there is a necessity to renew our territories and reconstruct our infrastructure. We are sure of our victory, and we are looking forward to post-war reconstruction and post-war period. So my name is Yaroslav Belov. I'm Vice President of the International Union Interstate Consultants Engineers Guild, and I'm convinced that the territories of Ukraine should be reconstructed, taking into account the green, social, and economic factors, ensuring sustainable development of the future generations of Ukraine. Why are we raising this issue today? Because in the framework of reconstruction of municipalities in Ukraine today, we should discuss projects and define priorities and form the teams. Therefore, the Association of the Cities of Ukraine and our organization have initiated this forum comprised of two panels. The first one is Sustainable Development of Cities, Green Finance and ESG Factors. And the second panel, Green Bonds as a Tool for Financing Local Environmental Projects. The forum will unite representatives of the local self-government and the legislative branch of power, executive branch of power, financial and banking institutions, and international organizations. Within the framework of this forum, we are planning to discuss the approaches to involving green funding into sustainable development of the cities, financial instruments, and their normative and legal regulation, and also implementation of local projects through emission of green bonds. And I'm glad to welcome Alexander Slobozhan, Executive Director of the Association of Cities of Ukraine. Hello, dear colleagues. This year, we have signed a joint memorandum, and we as organization represent local self-government, and I'm always in favor of the Western Ocean municipalities. Why? Because the name of our organization, Association of the Cities of Ukraine, celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. But besides the major cities and even towns, there are a lot of boroughs and villages having received the same powers and resources after the decentralization reform. So the topic of our discussion today is related to cities, but it's actually applicable to a wider scope, to municipalities. So we have representatives of smaller communities here, and for them it's going to be beneficial. And we also have involved the professional community. Mr. Yaroslav has already mentioned that, and you would probably ask why such a combination. Municipal authorities and consultants are in the process of reconstruction, and they are going to play a key role. Why am I referring to municipalities, because green finance and green investment as an instrument in the Western Europe, in the Western world, has been in place for some time, and the scope of the instrument is over $3 billion, $3 trillion rather. So most of the countries have instated this instrument, and there are a lot of climatic platforms, and there are various energy efficiency and energy saving measures and many other aspects. We believe, and this is our first joint activity within the framework of the memorandum, and the cooperation is going to be wider in scope. Unfortunately, today we have only the possibility to conduct it online, and some of the participants having joined today will hear it for the first time. And anyway, any crisis creates opportunities, and we wanted to deliver those opportunities to municipalities and to professional communities so that they're affected or realized in favor of our positive change. So I'm really pleased to see the representatives of central executive bodies and the parliaments online. And I would like to say that this topic is within the framework of decentralization reform that is positively assessed by our Western partners. And I will go back to the piece of history starting from the implementation of this reform in 2014. We have defined several steps. Everybody remembers about the budget decentralization, and this is the first step in 2014. In 2020, the second step was made, and point number 5, after the building of the capacity of the municipalities to use their resources, the involvement of the capacity of the communities to involve additional financial development instruments was prioritized. So we view it as your additional instrument of development. And it might seem complicated, but it will enable you to improve the quality of life of new communities, ensure sustainable development, and this will be a KPI for decentralization reform. And we will be joined today by one of the major, let's say, drivers of this reform, Vitaly Peskin from the Parliament, and he is from the Parliamentary Committee. And we will be also joined by the Minister of Regional Development of Ukraine, the Minister of Finance, that are the core players in this field. So I would like to invite everyone to be proactive. Why I refer to this bunch of topics, the reform, I focused the attention on green finance because there will be some specialists here who are more knowledgeable about it. It is just for you to be able to formulate the question and receive answers, and not to be afraid that you don't know something or that your small community will not be able to encompass this instrument or to take hold of this instrument. So we have high quality specialists here who are going to help you. And this is a matter of, development of all municipalities, not major cities only. So this is our first activity, and I wish you productive work. And we will prepare the first messages. We will start from a small step, but I would like to say that not only in the conditions of war is this an initiative that has emerged, but since 2014, the accent has been put on the municipalities' capacity to use new financial instruments, but the activities were there were just a few of them. We were focusing on administrative and territorial reform, servicing of bonds and grants. Everybody learned how to apply for grants, projects of regional development. And this situation reminds me of a circle around, people circling around some, lights, and they do not see significant resources behind them. And the task of municipal authorities is to demonstrate that the active legislation enables us to use this instrument for the experts or the specialists to show how this project is going to work. So calculations, assessment. So during the winter season, I think most of the communities shall assess the impact on the environment. Before that, it was just, a line in the documents, but when the heating installations started to being refurbished, we became aware of the increased value of this instrument for involvement of funding. So I wish everyone to have a productive day, and please pay attention to our speakers' contributions from the central authorities. They are setting the framework, and in the second part we will have a more narrow specifics, and this is one of the KPIs of the decentralization reform. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. And we go over to Vitaly Berzin, Member of Parliament, head of the Subcommittee on Administrative and Territorial Organization of the Verkhovna Rada, Committee on State Power Organization, Local Self-Government, Regional Development and Urban Planning. He will join online. Please focus on your screen. Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you for organizing this forum, and I would like to thank all the representatives of the municipalities contributing to our victory in this war. And I'm always saying that representatives of local municipalities are heroes, the same as those defending us at the east of, and south of Ukraine, because they are fighting with humanitarian crisis, and they are fighting with the bad conditions for IDPs. And we have to be honest, Ukraine, it's local self-governments and central authorities is looking forward to receiving billions of dollars in international financial support, but we need to create instruments for that. So this forum and the instrument that it's devoted to, the green bonds, it's a useful tool that will enable local self-government to involve resources. And the practices of, for example, Ukrenergo company having experience of using those instruments proves that it's a reliable path, and the relations having been built up by the associations and the parliamentary committee makes us think that we can trust the support of the government to the municipalities, and they can rely on central authorities. And we will dwell on practical ideas today, because such discussions result in the best models that bring the best results. Everything's gonna be Ukraine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Vitaly, for your address, and I would like to give the floor to Olena Krivoruchkina, Deputy Head of the Parliamentary Committee on Environmental Policy and Nature Management. Hello, everybody. I'm really grateful for your bringing up and putting high on the agenda this important challenge, because in the conditions of war, we need to keep in mind the reconstruction of Ukraine based on sustainable development, and local communities are the key elements able to ensure it at the grassroots. And using this opportunity, I would like to say the following that our team is involved in. Starting from the 1st of March this year, we have created a committee on documenting ecological crimes in Ukraine, and it includes representatives of the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Reintegration and Specialized Environmental Prosecutor's Office and the Security Service of Ukraine. And today we're documenting all damage in all communities caused by the military aggression of Russia. We calculate the amount of those damages, and we prepare the legislative basis and evidence basis for compensation of those damages. Today it's 1,387,000,000,000 in damages, but this is not the entire amount. It's gonna be significantly increased when we calculate damages on the temporarily occupied territory. And in Kherson region, we are already working as well. We are positive that we're going to prepare evidence base for this damage to be compensated in international court, which will create additional possibilities for the development of local communities. And the problematic of green finance is really important. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Elena. It's an important line of activity that you have just voiced, and we totally in favor of the terrorist country being liable in international institutions for all the atrocities committed. And we hope to fruitfully cooperate with you further. And I would like to add that the next speaker, Mr. Ruslan Grichanik, is the first deputy head of Ministry of Environmental, first deputy minister, apologies, of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. So a small remark, this is a wide scope of issues encompassing the energy sector, forestry, transport, etc. But these are all environmental projects, and the government entrusted the selection of environmental projects funded from the state and local budgets to the Ministry of Environment. And I invite Mr. Ruslan Grichanik. Please, the floor is yours. Hello, dear participants of the forum. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, dear organizers. Dear organizers, members of parliament, or stakeholders, we are aware that the Russian aggression has inflicted significant damage to Ukrainian environment, not just by damaging the grounds and air and waters, but also related to disrupting ecosystem-related services. So the government is not waiting till the end of war to plan the reconstruction. There is a section on eco-safety, prepared by over 200 experts, and this reconstruction plan envisages the implementation of 76 projects, and it's based on the baselines of EU Green Course and best practice
екологічних зелених фінансів. Ну, він довкілля, розуміючи
environmental and green finance, and being aware of that, we have developed, within the Ministry of Environment have developed a new policy envisaging amendment of the national legislation.
ці зміни передбачають і зміни до закону
Creation of the National Environmental Fund
і зміни до
and amendments to the law on protection of the natural environment and
політика реформ чи полісі
amendments to the tax code, and the policy agenda envisages the adoption of the law of Ukraine on environmental insurance. These are the normative and legal acts and, on the green bonds, and as a result, we intend to receive an active financial instrument to reconstruct our environment within the shortest period. To the colleagues, I urge everyone to get involved into the ministry's activities, and I wish you a productive day today. Thank you, Mr. Ruslan. On my behalf, I would like to thank the Ministry of Environment and Environmental Protection for their prompt feedback and willingness to participate in the work in this direction. And on our behalf, we are ready to support the ministry. Thank you very much. And let's go over to the next speaker. It's Mr. Igor Korokhovy, Deputy Head of the Minister of Community Development and Territories of Ukraine for European integration. You can just hear you and see you. There is some technical issue here, apparently. Just a second.
Добрий день, мене чутно? Видно?
Чудно. Так, чутно.
Hello again. Can you see me and hear me? Yes, please, the floor is yours.
В першу чергу хочу подякувати організаторам.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Association of Cities, for the invitation. It's a very important event today. I'm glad to welcome the colleagues from Parliament, from the local municipalities, and on behalf of Mr. Alexander Slobozhan, on behalf of the Ministry of Regional Development, we have always been an ambassador of local municipalities, local self-administration in the government, and the aspects that have been voiced are also our paradigm in support of the reform of local self-administration. Indeed, local self-administration should be the core of modernization of our state, and modernization includes not just physical reconstruction of the damaged infrastructure, but also a more global context, changing our social paradigm as bodies of local self-government, executive bodies, etc., refurbishing all these sectors of our daily routine. And local self-government is one of the most successful branches of power, which was documented by the reports of the European Commission and G7. And on our behalf, the Ministry of Regional Development continuous implementation of the EU practices in energy efficiency. Our focus is, of course, on building, and in the nearest future, we're going to launch a major program from the European Investment Bank, EIB, on thermal modernization of public building, and this proposal of the project was submitted to the Ministry of Justice for the registration of international project. It's another instrument for the municipalities to join the Green Course of the European Union and actively participate in thermal modernization of public buildings. Besides, there is another instrument that enables the municipalities to conduct thermal modernization of residential buildings, especially the ones within their self-organization, registered. And on the 17th of November, the Vidnopedim program for reconstruction of residential buildings was registered. It will be funded by the donors, in particular the European Union, having allocated 5 million euros for the first pilot phase. And upon the success of the pilot phase, the program will be extended and expanded. And there is a preliminary agreement to allocate over 12 million euros for this program. The Ministry of Regional Development receives a lot of proposals for reconstruction of residential and public buildings ruined by the Russian Federation, as well as infrastructural objects, and there is a need for systemic instruments for processing of those initiatives. We have prepared and developed draft concepts of state support for thermal modernization of buildings, energy modernization of energy enterprises and water utilities, and the forum today is important for municipalities to become the core of modernization in our state. Therefore, dear colleagues, I would like to thank everyone once again. I wish you a productive and efficient discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Igor. We have heard very interesting aspects about the involvement of municipalities in the reconstruction of the damaged infrastructure and buildings. And I think that the topic of our event today will be in line with the overall trend, because all the aspects related to thermal modernization and energy efficiency are the subject matter of green bonds all over the world, and we have talked to our colleagues abroad, and they confirmed that this is the core essence of green bonds. We will work, proceed in working actually on thermal modernization. Thank you for your support. And I'm glad to go over to the first panel. And I would like to say that involvement of funds or attraction of funds through green bonds, it's a very popular trend, but in spite of this instrument being relatively new, it has over $2 trillion segments all over the world. In 2021, $500 billion in green bonds have been issued, and local self-government is often an active player in this field. Alongside with that, the community of investors is forming in the world that do not wish to invest without a positive impact on the environment or prevention of climate change or CO2. And we are also progressing, and for this instrument in Ukraine we have developed the legal framework, and Back in 2020, the Parliament approved a number of legal acts for facilitating investment and introduction of the new instruments. And this was the introduction of green bonds, setting the framework for the market players, and in particular allowing territorial communities and their representative bodies to issue green bonds. The National Commission on Treasuries has approved the procedure of funding of environmental projects by issuing green bonds, and the Commission outlines the principles that the issuer should follow to attract funds. At the beginning of 2022, the government approved a concept for the development of green bonds market and has defined a number of directions, in particular related to issuers and stimuli for the issuer. I can add that local self-government bodies are usually the most competitive groups of potential issuers in the history of independent Ukraine. As far as I know, there have been several rounds of issuing bonds by local self-government. They were all free of default, and if we look at the best practices of international governments and financial organizations, for example, those issuing green bonds for transport projects, so governments help with clearing and development of technical documents, because the issuance of green bonds invokes a lot of questions from the stakeholders in the process of preparation of the documents, and we are going to discuss what is going to change in the Ukrainian legislation in this respect during our forum. And local self-government, in principle, can be majorly affected by green bonds. This instrument allows to attract funds both at the internal and external market, and this can be alternative energy, recycling of waste, green transport, rational use of resources, climate change adaptation, limitation of CO2 emissions, etc. And I think that we shall start the first panel, and it will be related to sustainable development of cities, green finance, and ESG factors. Our first speaker is Mr. Yuri Shafarenko, Directorate for Economic Policy of the Office of the President of Ukraine. He has a multi-year experience in the field of green economy. He has contributed to the development of the energy efficiency and green economy in Ukraine. Hello, dear participants, the organizers. I would like to thank you for the invitation and for raising this important topic for Ukraine. I can see that we have over 100 participants online, mostly local self-government, and the key factor in this process, as it has been rightfully mentioned, are the municipalities. I agree with all that has been said today, because this issue is indeed super relevant, and in spite of the work going on, we should actively work on green development. And we are aware that a full-scale invasion has inflicted significant damage to the country, and the core of our reconstruction is going to be finance. Now hundreds of billions of dollars have been lost in damages. Practically each residential area has suffered a strike on their infrastructure or supplies, and we have to elaborate mechanisms for attracting funds to the reconstruction process. In order to reconstruct the infrastructure, we have to involve long-term significant amounts of funding, in particular through green bonds. In the international practice, this becomes a higher and higher priority, and this is confirmed by the climate bonds initiative. The issue of green bonds is progressing geometrically worldwide, and currently is estimated at $2 trillion. And one should note that in recent years in Ukraine we have adopted a number of significantly important legal acts facilitating green finance. In particular, in 2019, Mr. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, signed a decree on the development of the country till the year 2030, and then the parliament has signed a law on involving financial instruments. This year, the government approved the concept for the introduction of the green bonds market in Ukraine on the 23rd of February. And I can see that there is Andriy Frolov, who was my colleague at the State Energy Efficiency Agency and who participated in the development of those documents and was actively working on those mechanisms. And I'm sure that this mechanism is going to be functional in Ukraine, and it will be a good indicator to the world that Ukraine has taken an obligation and respected it in terms of this mechanism. I would like to also stress that the president of Ukraine has many times stressed on the perspectives for the investment into our state. Investment in Ukraine is investment into the security of our world. Our state has a huge natural potential for the development of green energy and ammonia, and this can be funded through the green bond mechanism. So I think that we're going to see many referrals to that today, but Ukraine has a lot of capacity to issue green bonds, like Euroenergo, for example, issued green bonds totaling $825 million. And in spite of the war, they are respecting all the international obligations. So this mechanism is successful in spite of the situation in Ukraine, and we are aware that green bonds and the development of this financial instrument in Ukraine is of significant importance to the country, given the importance of reconstruction of territories via green bonds and green investment. We need to raise the interest of the municipalities into the issuance of those instruments. So I think this is the first step to open this market for the municipalities. So the issuance of green bonds will play a significant role because it creates a multiplication effect and it increases the investment attractiveness of our local municipalities. I wish you a productive discussion so that you can discuss all the challenges related to green bond market, and we need to go together to achieve the same goal, and we shall win. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you to have a productive and a safe forum. I'm ready within my competence to join the discussion on problematic aspects. Thanks again. Thank you, Mr. Yuri. We are aware of the President's position on attracting investors. I am aware that he recently met the head of BlackRock. This is one of the key investment funds in the world, and they have a strong focus on green instruments. And we are also broadcasting on YouTube. So if there are any questions, live to the speakers, please send us a message in Zoom. If we do not make it to answer the question right away, we will make some homework and send them to the speakers and then get back with the reply. So we have another channel in Zoom with English interpretation. So should someone be more comfortable with English, you can also go over to the English channel. The next speaker is Олександр Сущенко. He is the head of Environmental and Energy Direction of UNDP in Ukraine. He has a huge experience in green finance, and he has conducted a number of research on green funding in Ukraine, and also recommendations were developed on ESG for non-banking institutions. ESG is a significant component of the green finance system, and in the principles of sustainable finance, 3 mention ESG, so ecological, social, and governance aspects. Mr. Alexander, are you with us? I guess Mr. Alexander is delayed. We might give the floor first to Nelly Petkova, the next speaker, who is an economics and policy analyst in Growth and Global Relations Division of OECD. And she has devoted a lot of her track record to the unfolding of the green market in Ukraine. So Nelly, maybe you could share your outputs with the members of this forum. I cannot see you online. Apologies for the technical delays.
Так, у нас наступний спікер, якщо є, пані Оксана Реміга, старший радник з інвестицій Євроінвестбанку.
Our next speaker, Mrs. Oksana Remiga, Senior Advisor on Investments of the European Investment Bank. She can tell us about the approaches of the European Investment Bank to the green finance in Ukraine. We cannot hear you.
Зараз, одну хвилинку. Так, чути мене зараз? Так?
Так,
Can you hear me now?
Так, добрий день.
Okay, yes.
Добрий день. Я хочу
Hello, okay.
подякувати
I would like to thank you for the invitation, for the possibility to present the programs of the European Investment Bank,
сталого розвитку.
adjusting to sustainable development support in Ukraine. The European Investment Bank, together with Ukraine, have been trying to help Ukraine from the first moments of the Russian aggression. And I would like to refer to a number of packages of assistance already provided. The first solidarity package was about €500 million. 660 million euros were provided in immediate assistance. This package was supported by European guarantees, and It was to support the liquidity in order for the government of Ukraine to be able to use those funds for the most urgent needs. Humanitarian package was provided in March 2020, and it made up 2.5 million euros. It was coordinated by the European Institute of the European Investment Bank, and it was aimed at providing food, water, and medications to the people who have been affected by the conflict. The second package, Solidarity Package, comprises 1 billion euros, and this package was again supported by the guarantees of the European Union, and it was aimed at reconstructing the damaged infrastructure and energy efficiency reinstallation in preparation to the winter season. Also, funds were allocated to restore the damaged energy infrastructure in the amount of 80 million euros. The other participants of our conference should think about the reconstruction of Ukraine, should start thinking about the reconstruction of Ukraine right away. And the European Investment Bank is working on the new concept of initiative for reconstruction of Ukraine in long-term and mid-term perspective as part of a wider architecture in order to ensure a longer-term growth of Ukraine in view of the future accession of Ukraine to the European Union. A couple of words about the European Investment Bank. The European Investment Bank is a climatic and green bank, and we have undertaken to enhance the level of support related to climate and activities related to this topic should enhance and exceed 50% of our activities, of the activities of our bank. 1 trillion of the investment by the European Investment Bank should be attracted during the next decade. And the key objective is to speed up to a climatic neutral and climatically or environmentally sustainable and green economy. And the next aspect that the European Investment Bank is always focusing upon is to ensure that all the financial activities are in line with the Paris Agreement, and with this objective, we started this transition starting from 2020. I have outlined the plans for the future of the European Investment Bank. These plans are being developed together with the government of Ukraine in order to invest into Ukraine in the future. First of all, these are 2 credit lines. One of them is being launched, and the other one has been working for some time, but it can be used now as well. This is Ukrainian public building energy efficiency.
Публічних установах. Обсяги цього кредиту по недорівнює
The
300 мільйонів.
scope of this loan is 312 million. The final beneficiaries are municipalities and local communities, and the focus group is
Великі муніципалітети не, ну, скажімо так,
all municipalities, but let's say bigger municipalities are not excluded from the project. It's just the priority is being placed on smaller ones. And the implementation of energy efficient measures in kindergartens, schools, healthcare institutions, and administrative buildings are prioritized as well. The activities or credits component are complemented by the grants provided by the EU in the amount of 5 million. These funds are allocated for technical assistance for the implementation of this loan. And the implementation of the projects at the expense of this loan. And I would like to say that the implementing agency of this project and the responsible body is the Ministry of Community Development and Territories of Ukraine. And by the end of December, the call for proposals will be open, and if you have an opportunity, we welcome the municipalities with the already prepared technical documents and also the municipalities that are in the process of its development. And also another category
принципі, можливість аплікувати на підтримку розробки.
The municipalities that need to develop the documentation, and they can also apply for technical assistance to develop the documents. Those funds are limited, so we are guided by the principle first come, first served, but the priority during the first competition, the first call, will be placed on municipalities with prepared technical documents, and the conditions of this call will be published on the website of the ministry. They envisage a 50% funding of the costs not directly related to energy efficiency. The other half should be earmarked for energy efficiency. The second program is the Municipal Infrastructure Development Program. It has been working in Ukraine for a long time, and we are now approaching the implementation of the projects that have been in preparation for some time now and even submitted. The possibility of receiving new applications is limited, but the projects that have been supported are hopefully going to demonstrate the outputs we were expecting and will make their contribution into the sustainable development of Ukraine and reconstruction of Ukraine from the damage inflicted by war. And we are talking about Lutsk and wastewater treatment and rehabilitation plan.
відходами.
and solid waste management project in Lviv,
Робота по
and the work on the support and rehabilitation of
водопостачання у Миколаєві
Mykolaiv
була розпочата. Вона
has been initiated.
або переформатована у
It
зв'язку
was postponed or reformatted due to the damage inflicted to the system, and it's damage from war. And should we have any opportunities inside, we shall proceed with the program, and this is what is being in place and what the European Investment Bank is doing in Ukraine. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you for the active participation in various projects in Ukraine. The next speaker is Alexander Sushenko, head of the Direction Ecology and Energy, UNDP in Ukraine, and he has been fully involved in the implementation of green finance in Ukraine. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to share the results of our work. We have been working closely with you and with Mr. Volodymyr, and this will
економічним агентам на всіх рівнях нашої системи отримати доступ.
enable the economic agents at all levels to receive funding. One of those aspects are
Фінансування, яка була створена ще в Держенергоефективності декілька років тому, і пан Андрій якраз
due to the activities of the working group at the State Energy Efficiency Agency. Mr. Andriy was in charge of that, and he contributed to the concept of green bonds in Ukraine. On our behalf, we, like UNDP and developers of the portfolio, we were involved in technical assistance. We were helping by providing expertise from the national and international experts, and the results of this work are available as reporting, and these are the best international practices. This direction should be prioritized, and the government should resolve on prioritizing this direction, because this is the key for the access to the green financing market, to the green bonds market. We are cooperating with the National Bank and introducing the requirements to financial reporting, which is an important component, because selecting a project and receiving funding is one thing, but those providing those funds should be able to report on their activities and demonstrate how they are contributing to green projects. So this is just a segment of our activities. We are helping in reconstruction of sustainable finance, and of course we were part of the development of the recommendations of the standards of green bonds. Mr. Andriy is well aware about this work. In general, it's a complicated and multi-step project, and it's evidently unfeasible to implement it within a year. So the work is ongoing even during the times of war. We have supported an exhibition pavilion, an exhibition group with some activities related to green development. And at this point, we are expecting to receive the funding for green and sustainable reconstruction of the impacted territories. The availability of the national taxonomy on green bonds are pieces of the puzzle for the general solution that will enable this direct access. And at the level of the cities, and that's what we're working on, we need to help them understand what is green funding and who has access to those funds. They should be aware how to start, how to report, and where to look for funding. So we are expecting a lot of work, and we hope for fruitful cooperation. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. So before you joined, I said that out of 6 principles of sustainable development, 3 indicate ESG as priorities, but another aspect, ESG is a quickly developing trend in the world. And I saw that the EU is adopting the legislation on non-compulsory financial reporting. How relevant is it going to be in general? Well, ESG is a core element of the market, and all the green funding players assess projects against this background, irrespective of the fact if it's a city or a company or a state or a region who's part of those relations. The understanding of the indicators and KPIs is essential. If the city is aware of the right indicators, it can select the right project and demonstrate the result expected by the banking institution. So priorly it was a voluntary concept, but in 2019 and 2020, the EU started to introduce legal requirements. It's not just a requirement to receive some benefits on the market. It's the legal requirement which is compulsory, and everyone is aware that our core helpers providing this funding are countries of the European Union. So this aspect is related not to funding only, but it's also a matter of export operations. Everything related to financial risks is compiled and analyzed because the cities will be aware of the indicators and report properly. Then they can receive access to funding, and banks will be happy to support them in this process. What else is important? Even the regulations applied to sustainable development in Europe contain ESG, which is in practice a basis for this approach. Being aware that there is ESG, we have many doors to open to support our plans. If we ignore it, the result will be not very good.
Зрозумів. Дякую вам. З свого боку хотів би прокоментувати. На жаль,
Understood. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, Mr. Alexander Slobodan has a commitment for another event.
Я поки що буду з паном Андрієм вдвох в панелі.
And we will hold this panel together with Mr. Andrei. I wanted to say that in this context, we have been cooperating with the Association of the Cities, and we want to develop methodological recommendations for the local self-government authorities, including all the criteria of sustainable development. Previously, it was financial reporting, and now it's sustainable development reporting. We would like to include the best international practices and implement them into the recommendations for the local self-government. Should you wish to be involved in this process, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much for your contribution, and I would like to give the floor to Nelly Petkova, Policy Analyst of the Environmental Department of OECD Environment Directorate, and she has devoted a lot of her track record to the development of green finance in Eastern Europe. OECD has conducted the research on the green capital, and I would like to invite Nelly to share her experience.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and hello everybody. First I want to apologize for speaking in English. I hope we will have a good interpretation. I've been asked by the organizers to say a few words about our work that we've been doing on support for green bond markets development in the region of Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia, as we call it, and Ukraine is part of this region. I have been working on issues related to environmental or to green investments, green finance for many years, and we've been analyzing different sources of finance for green investments. We've been working with governments and supporting them in making these sources more efficient, in spending the resources in a more efficient way, in making sure that potential project owners and developers would have easier access to these sources of finance. And one of the main outcomes of our analysis, one of the issues that we saw over the past years was, as you may expect, many of you would know that probably, is that the main source of financing for green, particularly infrastructure investments, where most of the municipal bonds would be needed to finance such infrastructure projects, the main source has been bank financing. And again, it's not a surprise because the banking sector is the dominant financial source altogether in the region. And particularly those banks, Ukr Bank was one of those banks in Ukraine that has benefited from environmental credit lines extended by different IFIs like EBRD, like our colleagues from the European Investment Bank. And then these resources were on-lent further to final or end borrowers. Over the years, though, there have been developed markets, developed economies, but not only, I would say. Over the last 12-15 years, many countries have started actually using the capital markets as a source of long-term financing. And in our program, we were thinking why it is that countries in our region do not show any interest and any appetite to use this market, to use the instruments available on this market and to raise financing for environmental, in particular, investments. And with this in mind, we decided that it would be useful to look at and analyze the markets in the region to understand why the markets are not reacting like even countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia, or in Latin America. They had started issuing green bonds and raising financing for green investments much earlier, while the countries in our region started doing so only very recently. Having said that, I will try to show a few slides which I have prepared, and I hope I will be able to upload them on the screen. Just wonder, do you see my screen or you don't? Hello?
Yes, we can see it. Please make it full screen.
We see.
You do, okay. I just want to make it, yes, okay, the whole screen. It's a bit slow, sorry for that. Oops, yes. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, the study that we did on regional trends and supporting capital market development, and particularly debt capital markets and bond capital markets to work for environmental and green investments, we covered in our study several countries, including, of course, Ukraine, but alongside we had Armenia, we looked at Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Moldova, and most recently we started working in Uzbekistan as well. As I was saying, despite this recent crisis like COVID, like the war that you're having on your land with Russia, green bond issuance has been steadily growing over the years to the extent that it reached globally more than 1 trillion altogether. But the countries in our regions have been a bit slow and late to take up this instrument. It was only in 2019 when we saw the first such green bond issued, and as you may already know, you may have discussed it already, it was Ukraine and specifically your largest renewable energy producer, the Tech Renewables, that issued the first green bond. Then over the last 3 years, we saw almost an explosion compared to what the situation was before of green bonds in various countries in the region, including in Armenia, in Georgia, in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan. As you know, bonds can be issued by different players in the market, and it can be by public authorities at national and subnational or local level. It can be enterprises in the real sector. It can be financial institutions such as banks. It can be supranationals, as we call them, like different international development banks, etc. What we've seen in the region over the last few years is that most of the countries and most of the issuances come from the corporate sector, which is not always the case in other regions in the world, in other emerging market regions or developing countries regions, where we've seen more sovereign issuances, and in these countries it has been basically the governments, the sovereign that has been driving the development of the green bond market, which is not exactly the case in the UKR region. Of all the countries that we've seen, Armenia is the only country where the banking sector, basically the largest Armenian bank, Amiria Bank, issued two corporate green bonds. And on the other hand, Uzbekistan has been the only country where we've seen some sovereign issuance, although the bonds Uzbekistan issued were not labeled clearly as green bonds, but they were labeled rather as they are of the type of sustainability linked bonds, but they have elements and features of green bonds. None of the countries so far has issued municipal green bonds. It's one instrument which is still to come. What I know from our discussions with the representatives of people in the countries is that Armenia is currently preparing their first municipal green bond, and it will be for a bond issued by Yerevan city for clean transport investments in the city. We know that in Chisinau, in Moldova, the Chisinau municipality also issued a bond which was not labeled as green or sustainability bond, but it was also a bond for green investments in a way, for the city, clean city transport. And but altogether there's been very little or none, no discussion on issuing municipal bonds. Bonds can be, as you know, floated, and they can be placed or issued both on international and domestic markets. And what we've seen is that of the major green bonds that were issued between the countries, the main countries in our analysis, basically the split between international and domestic markets was 50-50, a little, so to say. Both Georgia and Ukraine issued their the bonds, the issuers went to international markets, to international stock exchanges. And what we've seen from this analysis is that when you go to international markets, to international exchanges, the chance to raise a significant amount of financing is much higher than on local domestic exchanges. And as you can see, if you can see well on this in this table, particularly Ukraine was not only the first country to issue green bonds, but also Detek Renewables and Ukrenergo were the two largest issuances that we've seen in the region. And the issue is that investors were very interested. There was an oversubscription of investors who were interested to participate in and to finance these bonds. And what we've seen is that usually investors, when there is such an oversubscription, you can expect that the bonds are really large in terms of size, and experience from other regions in the world shows that to attract the appetite, the international investors, you need to usually issue rather large bonds, usually around 100, at least $100 million or euros. This is a little bit of a, one can call it a threshold. Why in Ukraine, for example, this the two issuers were able to raise such amounts is because they've had particularly Detek has had previous experience with issuing bonds on the international markets. They have very good, at least at the time of issuance, credit history, and investors were feeling comfortable with investing in the bond. One important thing with green bonds is that, as I think it was probably discussed earlier today, International financial institutions such as EBRD, ADB, they often participate in the issuance process and they play the role of, as we call them, anchor investors, which increases the credibility of the bond issuance and issuer, as well as they help with making the bond more attractive, like in the case of Ukrainian, where EBRD participated with a 75 million stake in the bond. One important thing which I wanted to say here also is the fact that if you look at the table, you can see that the coupon rates are much lower than what we see usually in the region in terms of interest rates offered by in the banking sector. So this makes the instrument kind of interesting for potential issuers. Another issue that you can keep in mind is the fact that many of the issuers, these first issuances in the region, they issued bonds that whose proceeds they spent on refinancing old debt. I would think personally that investors would be interested in new assets, financing new assets, but a number of the issuances we've seen, the proceeds generated by the bonds were used for refinancing all debt, like in the case of the Georgian Railway Company or even in Ukraine, in DTEC as well, significantly. So sorry, in Ukraine, I wanted to say, but what is, I mean, in Georgia, for example, or in Armenia, as we will see later, about 70% of these proceeds were used for for covering old debt, which is not always the optimum approach to attracting investors, I would say. When the bonds are issued on the local exchanges, what we see, you can easily see it in the table. The amounts raised are much smaller. They are much more limited. One important thing maybe to say is that, as I think you may have heard already, a number of countries have started preparing regulations on, I think it was discussed on ESG regulations, on taxonomy, on identifying projects for green bonds that can be financed by this instrument. But when you go to international markets, you need to have, there are certain requirements which do not exist on the local market, such as the preparation of a green bond framework, or the requirement to have a second party opinion, to have reports on the impact of the investments. And Armenia and Amiria Bank is an interesting example in this context, because while Armenia is not very well prepared, the Armenian, I would say, regulator, the government, the regulator, have not developed any particular regulations and legislation related to green finance in general and to green bonds more specifically. Amiria Bank itself has done a lot of work to prepare the issuance of the bond, which allowed the bank to actually go for and issue two green bonds already in a short period of time, which shows that even without government regulations in place, certain issues, if they are willing, and particularly they are willing to go to the international market, they can do their own homework and be successful in their issuance. The issue is that all this additional work costs money, and even at the municipal level, when municipalities start thinking about this instrument using bonds to raise money for infrastructure investments, they need to keep in mind that there are costs involved in developing the green bond framework, in identifying the potential projects and developing the project pipelines, in having verifiers check their preparatory documents, as well as developing and monitoring and reporting on an annual basis usually. And these costs may be significant, so it may be important for the government as well to think about support mechanisms for the municipalities. I don't know if I need to say much about why green bonds are a possible and interesting option for different issues, including for municipalities. But maybe one thing which I want to say is, and I already mentioned it in a way, is that bonds are traditionally used for infrastructure projects because they usually require significant amounts of investment, where the upfront costs can be very large, and projects with long-term income streams, and bonds are structured in a way which can satisfy these requirements for infrastructure projects. Particularly compared to bank lending, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the main source of financing for the moment across the whole region, including in Ukraine for the moment. They are rather competitive source of finance because they offer, often, as we saw, a lower cost of capital. They can provide longer maturities. We have, I didn't mention it, but the bonds which we've seen in the region can be up to 5 years, 7 years already. Discussions we see. They have relatively low collateral requirements, so from this perspective, of course, they can be an attractive option to consider by potential issues, including at the municipal level. I will skip a little bit of that because I'm not sure if it was not discussed earlier. What I wanted to say maybe is a few words about the situation in Ukraine, which I'm sure you know much better than me, so I'm not going to go into details. But in our analysis and comparing it to the other countries in the region, what we've seen is that Ukraine, as we said, has been among the countries in the region that has done already a lot of work in terms of developing supportive green finance framework, and also the necessary regulations that provide guidance to potential issues both at the national level, but also at the corporate and at municipal level. I understand there is a lot of thinking around this, and of course different participants in the government, like the Ministry of Environment, is working on issues related to green bond issuance by the public sector. The Security Commission, I think, is working on providing guidance to the corporate sector, and I hear what I heard, if I understood correctly. Now you're thinking about methodologies for incentivizing municipalities to go into the market as well. And the interesting thing is that I think I remember that many years ago, in the 90s and maybe early 2000s, Ukraine did have experience with municipal bonds for infrastructure projects, but then due to various crises in the market, and not only beyond the Ukrainian market, outside market, the Russian financial crisis, things changed, and in reality, municipal bonds, I understand, I think, and they completely disappeared from the market. One of the issues which we've seen everywhere, including in Ukraine, as I mentioned, is the lack of good projects, of high quality project pipelines that can be offered to investors. And in many discussions I've had in different meetings and so on, one thing that we hear is that despite the crisis, there is still we are in a situation where there is more financing available and investors chasing high quality assets than projects which are available, which implies that countries, including in Ukraine, need to do a lot of work to prepare for before they do any issuance and before they start contacting and talking to potential investors, be it in the municipal or national level. One other issue that we've seen is that the lack of institutional capital, which also means that the market in Ukraine, as in the other countries in the region, is very, very shallow. We don't have pension funds, insurance, and insurance agencies. They are not considering investing in the market. So there might be a need for the government and the regulators to think how to invest, to provide incentives and to develop the regulations on this. On these players in a way to allow them to invest at the local market as well. Taxation, again, I'm sure you know more about this. There are issues related to taxation and specifically to income from government bonds, which is exempt, versus taxation of income from corporate bonds, which are not exempt. So this leads to the situation where there are more government bonds than corporate or even municipal bonds at this level. So given the overall situation and particularly now, this is a difficult situation, and of course, the Ukraine will have enormous needs, reconstruction needs. There is a need to really prepare good investment programs, good plans with well-designed projects, because it will be otherwise more difficult to attract and bring investors. Whether the domestic market will be active in providing financing, I think if we are realistic, probably in the near to medium term, this will not be the case, and Ukraine will need to continue going to the international markets to raise funds. But in any case, I think bonds and municipal bonds are a financing option that needs definitely to be on the table, and any support that OECD can provide in terms of working with the government or with colleagues from the city association will be will be happy to discuss this further and see how we can also help you and support your efforts in this direction. I will stop here and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Дякую вам, пані Нелі.
Thank you very much, Nelly. I would like to clarify a couple of issues. We have discussed Armenia and the aspect that the funds were attracted for green transport, but who was the issuer of those bonds? If it was not the local self-government, were those some municipal enterprises or communal or utility enterprises?
If I remember correctly, because I'm not sure I remember correctly, but I think it was indeed the public transport company in Yerevan, in Chisinau that has issued the bond, of course, with support by the international community, and I think they were very successful and very happy with the resources they managed to raise. If I understood your question correctly, because I cannot find the translation from Ukrainian.
Ага, ви абсолютно правильно зрозуміли моє питання. Я вам дякую.
You have understood my question very correctly. I'm very grateful to you, so we can conclude that the issuer can be not exactly a municipality, but a public enterprise or a municipal enterprise where the enterprise is owned by the community and personalized by the executive body, and this topic can be interesting for the audience. Your presentation is really interesting, and what I pointed out for myself from your table on the coupon, I can see that the percentage is decreasing significantly. So in 2019 it was 8.5, but in 2022 it's about 3%. So as I understand, a lot of investors today, when selecting between income and income with benefits for the environment and the society, are in favor of the second option. So social responsibility is inherent to investors. And we would be interested in the best practices from your examples from the Eastern European countries, developing countries, regarding the fact that the emission of green bonds is rather uneasy, and this is not a short-term perspective. This is clear, but the process of issuance of green bonds will require from local self-government the inclusion of certain expertise and experts and adoption of certain regulations. If we're talking about international stock exchanges and international verifiers, so the organizations interested in the development of the world market bonds, of the world bonds market development, those organizations can help with the funding of certain drafting of documents or technical assistance projects, or can help with the other aspects that the municipalities are not capable to help with. So this is quite a feasible perspective.
I understood understood everything correctly. As I mentioned, we are working also on these issues. And for your information, we start planning a big international event, a big international conference jointly with the European Commission. And it's planned for next year towards the end of April. One of the major issues for this conference will be the discussion of further support for the countries in our region in particular. And it will be good if we have people like you who participate in this debate, because if we all work together, not only OECD on our side, but if we present the case together with the countries and the particular needs, although I know that there are different international institutions who can help, and I think there is so much work that not one single institution will be able to support and help all countries in the region. From this perspective, we can develop a plan how to support different countries, different levels of government with very specific and practical assistance that will be needed by the countries. So I think we will be, I hope we will stay in touch, and we will definitely invite you to this event, and we can discuss all together how we can continue, further working in this direction.
Я вам щиро дякую. Надзвичайно цікава доповідь, надзвичайно
Thank you
цікава.
very much. It's a very interesting presentation. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the invitation. We will proceed with the work. And I would like to go over to Mr. Igor Kirichuk. He is the national coordinator of the UN EFGCIP project from UNIDO. He and his organization supports innovators and environmentally sustainable projects. Mr. Igor, the floor is yours. Please tell us how you do that. Dear participants of the conference, I'm glad to welcome you. I'm glad to be here at this event, because starting from July 2018, the UNIDO project has conducted a similar activity. It was the first planned activity of this kind, and it's sort of a symbolic start. I used to work at the Association of Cities of Ukraine about 17 years ago, and I'm really pleased to share this experience of mine and to see my colleagues. And I would like to tell you about UNIDO. UNIDO is supporting the development of developing countries or transition countries in modernization of their industry and countering poverty, and its sustainable development concept supports innovative programs. UNIDO at present has 45 regional representations. We don't have one in Ukraine. In Ukraine, we have a clean production center, and this is a center working in its territory. Last year, the Cabinet of Ministers adopted a resolution approving the Center for Investment and Transport Technologies in Ukraine. And this year it's going to be implemented. This year it will be assigned by the Cabinet of Ministers.
Можливості програми, цієї програми Організації Об'єднаних Націй. Якщо говорити про програми, які йдуть, то я коротенько скажу, які проекти є, і де може долучитися Асоціація міст України. На сьогодні в Україні йде 8 проєктів. І, скажімо,
the project that I am in charge of is the support of innovational startups, and this project is supporting the initiatives of the communities of universities and business communities, and provides support at the level of innovational ideas. There is another project in terms of support of energy management, facilitating enterprises in the implementation of energy efficient technologies, and the project facilitates an interest-free credit from Bank. There is a Center for Resource Efficient Production at the basis of the Kyiv Polytechnical University, and realization of expert potential in the composition of added value and enhancement of the quality infrastructure. So bringing the companies to the standards which are in place in the West. The project for handling hazardous waste is also being implemented. Last year there was a project on the implementation and support of the eco-industrial parks policy, and it was related to both industrial parks and eco-industrial parks. And this project used to work in Kherson, and you know that the situation there was quite complicated, and what is in the pipeline now, we are preparing a new program. This is green reconstruction of Ukraine and post-crisis reconstruction process, and the supporting agency is the Ministry of Economy. They are collecting proposals until April included, and we need to express the initiative on what can be included in this program, and probably it will have the biggest budget. This program will have a bigger scope of investment based on sustainable development. It will be focusing on energy efficiency, decarbonization, and many other important aspects. So currently, we are open for cooperation, and we can involve municipalities into this program And this is a very important contribution. And UNIDO has a program, this for city. So the program bridging green economy and the cities. So the organizers of the conference today will be happy if Ukraine joins this program. And the Association of the Cities of Ukraine could be a representative of Ukraine in this program and share its experience in the implementation of those projects. I can provide my humble assistance. We can select some pilot cities, and we could work on the topics of transport, and much has been done in Ukraine already. We can work on the programs of GEF, Global Environmental Fund. We have experience in working with those projects, and we can review, or we can consider a project on involving Ukrainian municipalities into this instrument. So there is a specific platform. So this is in brief on UNIDO's activities in this sector. If there are any questions, we will be happy to answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Igor, for this useful information for the participants and the audience. I think that we will see a positive reaction from municipalities to your invitation to join. Unfortunately, the head of the association is now absent, but we will give over this information to the Association of the Cities. And should there be any interest, we will be happy to involve you. Thank you for this opportunity. I will be happy to see you on board and see future opportunities for Ukraine. The next speaker is Oleksiy Savin, Director of Department of Environmental Engineering and Implementation of Resource-Saving Projects of Ukrgazbank. Mr. Oleksiy, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
Зараз чутно?
Да, зараз чутно. Супер.
Зрозуміло, так, зараз підключу презентацію. Так. Так, ще раз дякую за запрошення.
Thank you for your invitation. The topic is very complicated but interesting.
Розвернулося, ви бачите, вона включає слайди.
Так, видно, да.
Добре, так.
Can you see this slide? Yes.
Про відновлення міст.
We're going to talk about the reconstruction of the cities, and some of them will be reconstructed for taxpayers' money, which are not rightly referred to as public funds, but in fact this is taxpayers' money, and should these people not be able to earn money and pay taxes, there will be no further development, so this path is going to be not efficient, so let's consider alternative versions. I would like to say a couple of words about the Ukrgazbank, and they have considerable achievements in terms of clean energy. As you can see that a significant section of green projects have been implemented with the participation of Ukrgazbank. We started to implement back then the ESG projects. We have involved in waste management projects, etc. But the achievements that we had before the war made us understand that the principles are not sufficient. There is no sound from the speaker.
Маємо так світосприйняття наших методичних і
Ми вас зараз вже не чуємо, певно, в зв'язок.
З початку війни
Пане Олексію,
Cannot hear you.
і ми частково не чуємо десь вже як
We can hear that you are dropping.
Теж у нас тільки перший поки що на екрані, якщо можна, якщо вийдете вже по слайдах, то трошки опускайте. Ага.
Так. Давайте зробимо так. Як чутно зараз?
Зараз прекрасно чутно. Прекрасно видно.
Добре, тут я розповідав про те, що змінилося в Україні, в банківському секторі і так далі. Ну, грубо кажучи, зараз.
I was saying about the changes in the banking sector. During the war, the bank has been continuing to fund projects in the agricultural sector, etc. But the core thing is that we continue to cooperate with international companies. These companies have money and they are ready to invest, but no one is going to give you money for your nice eyes. You have to promise something and to provide some reasonable goal. So we need to achieve certain results and to have certain deliverables. And I would like to go back to the situation which has been in place. The core thing is that we are losing human resource. People are relocating, losing their jobs, and we are at the stage of ruining all our we are facing the ruin of all our infrastructure, and we have experience of blackouts, so it's disrupting our work. And let me tell you what the challenges are, but also how we can overcome it. So the industry is being disrupted as well, and there is a huge stagnation in terms of financial and economic activities, and the resources from the banks are not always enough for the current situation, but for the subsequent situation, they're not enough because the Ukrainian banks have been working with the deposits of the population and of the industry. And another factor is that there has been a significant change in the conditions of loans from the National Bank, and the percentage of the banks is really contingent on those tariffs. And we still have the absence of long-term funding in Ukraine, and the amount of loan can, the term of loan rather, cannot exceed 5 or 7 years, and some of the interventions need to be implemented right away, and some of them need to be implemented after the end of the war, because in 5 years, implementation of a major project is not feasible. And another major problem is that the modern business and the modern cities lack any hard collateral. Some of the collaterals were destroyed, some were relocated from the eastern region, and they started using leased equipment or leased land plots, so they have nothing to give back as repayments of the loans, but they are willing to work, but they cannot give the resources. But they would be a good team with the Ukrainian banks, communicating with the international organizations, implementing different international programs for the funding of the critical infrastructure, energy sector, social sector, etc. And for this, we need to understand the spheres of interest for the international investors, and we mentioned that we need to promise the implementation of their spheres of interest. So everything shall revolve around circular economy, sustainable development, and security, because this, in principle, is a new concept of development which has been in place for the last 10 years. We have been working in circular economy, but we had quite an insignificant progress in this respect, because business was quite comfortable as it was, and business is now devastated to the ground, and some of them need to recreate everything from scratch, and they need funding both from the Ukrainian and international sources, but they need to rely on circular economy because this will secure our economy, and this will increase the value of the final product and improve the environmental safety and social responsibility. So, reconstruction of the cities, creation of full-scale green transport in the cities and beyond, recreation of sustainable production, energy independence. We can say a lot here, but as I said, energy is the core factor, and the first and foremost task for the country will be centralization of heat generation, and each city would like to have its own biomass or biogas plant to provide the city or region with the heat and electricity and jobs, and it will work on the using the waste of other production facility not far away, and in principle, it's going to provide biomethanol and electricity generation into the grid. So we review this maximally decentralized approach to the energy system, and it will help us to proceed within the circular economy. Therefore, the development of energy independence will not be feasible without waste management resolution. It was referred to in this situation. It can be resolved together with the other questions. And renovation of the industry, renovation of medical institutions, medical equipment, energy efficiency, which were referred to. And, for example, one of those variants is quite small. It was referred to by UNIDO. It's a project on energy efficiency and implementation of energy management principles in the utility sector. This case is quite an apparent one because the international company overtakes all the risk and provides 100% guarantee, and the client, even without their direct participation, as in the other investment loans, normally you would have 30 to 40%. For this project, in order to implement the energy management principles and replacement of equipment for a more energy efficient one, we can use this guarantee mechanism to make this loan more profitable, more favorable, without the use of internal resources, and reconstruction of Ukrainian economy will require the effort of many Ukrainian banks, but Ukrgazbank is one of the leaders. We are a unique bank having our own technical office, helping our clients understand the project and helping to prepare the documents to get them in compliance with the norms. They can provide the contact of suppliers and network. So this non-financial instrument is rather efficient and helps us in our interaction with international organizations, because normally they propose consultants we can work with, but it complicates or extends the process. So we can have a full-scale office providing consultants. So, and the cross-cutting aspect of my presentation is cooperation with international partners. We cooperate with a lot of them, and we present quite an extended program for the development of electricity and procurement of generators. So in a couple of weeks, we will be able to see and to join this initiative. And a major advantage is that we focus on the principles of ESG that many foreign companies refer to. And for them, it would be more understandable to work through a Ukrainian bank supporting this idea than a regular financial organization prioritizing profits and not social responsibility. So we must support the reconstruction of Ukraine now. Let's work better and greener. And I would like to invite you for cooperation. Should you have projects requiring financial support, we will seek for external donors, analyze the project and make it better and more efficient. So these are some general aspects. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Дякуємо вам, пане Олексію.
Thank you very much, Alexei. It's a very interesting presentation. I have been I have been tracking, ESG in Ukraine. This is a very relevant topic, not just for business structures, but also for the state, because there are a lot of ESG regions and ESG cities, and these are the questions uniting our society, irrespective of political attributions or any other aspect. Arab countries are also very interested. Asia is also very active, and we as a country that should be in the international supply chain, we should be compliant. Thank you so much again for this interesting presentation. And I think that we can go over to questions. In particular, questions from the chat, they will be presented in the second panel. And maybe we have some subject for discussion for the speakers. No questions at this point. We have another panel. From governmental representatives. Unfortunately, the National Securities and Financial Market Commission was not able to join. Our second panel is green bonds as a tool for financing local environmental projects. I would like to give the floor to our speakers. And Mr. Andriy Frolov was frequently referred to by our first panel. Mr. Andriy Frolov is one of the most famous persons in Ukraine in terms of green bonds. So Andriy is our colleague. He is the head of the Green Finance Center. In our organization, we cooperate on this matter, and we have been working with the Association of the Cities on this. I think he is quite a knowledgeable person in this. And Andriy, please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Yaroslav. Welcome, dear participants of the forum. Let's put my presentation on the screen. We have discussed green finance today, and there are a lot of instruments and a lot of mechanisms involved in them. But I would like to go back to the green bonds. This is the newest instrument in the world that has become popular. And it takes up not a very big segment, but a very dynamic one. And green bonds were first emitted by the European Development Bank in 2007 for the amount of $1 billion. But in 10 years, this indicator boosted 100 times. So at this point, it's about $100 billion US. And last year, Globally, $500 billion US dollars were issued in green bonds, and in the world emission of green bonds, in total, over $2 trillion US dollars have been invested. So the core instruments are EBRD, the International Financial Corporation, the World Bank, and other international financial institutions. But gradually the instruments started to encompass other groups of issuers. In particular, the segment is now about 20%. Besides, international development banks are present at the market, and sovereign bonds and sub-sovereign bonds are becoming more and more popular for the state and municipalities, and the segment is continuously growing. And of course, the proceeds from the sale of green bonds, this is the world best practice, that these proceeds are invested in green projects. So it's mostly renewable energy sources, energy efficiency, waste management, green transport, and water resource management. Mostly, this market is dominated by the world leaders, China and EU countries, the US, so they are constantly developing this market and dominating this market. And this market is usually targeted by developing countries, helped by the international institutions, so that the mission is successful. Ukraine is not lagging behind, and a lot of speakers mentioned that in Ukraine a legal framework was created, the baseline law was adopted in June of 2020, the recommendations of the National Commission on the market of green bonds, and the Ministry of Environment is developing the last particular document, the decree on supervision of projects funded at the expense of the state and municipal budgets. And for municipalities, this procedure is super. What are green bonds? The legislation defines that a green bond is the one, the proceeds thereof are used for the funding of green projects. The emission of green bonds can be effected by the state or entrusted state bodies, local self-government, legal entities, and also some specialized financial institutions created by the government. Also, it can be emitted by international financial organizations. The particularity of the green bonds is that proceeds shall be allocated to support green projects, and the regulations are established in the form of recommendations, and what kind of projects can be financed. They were structured into 10 segments. The first one is energy efficiency, so the construction of the new buildings which are energy efficient, or energy efficiency of the existing buildings, smart grid projects that are related to the production or repairs of the equipment necessary for the projects on energy efficiency. Renewable or alternative energy is the second activity. So all the activities related to distribution or production of green energy. And of course, the equipment and its reconstruction. The third aspect is prevention and control of pollution. So this is related to environmentally clean technologies for improving the ground, limiting the emissions into the environment. And the fourth one is environmentally sustainable management by living natural resources and land use. This is first and foremost environmentally sustainable forestry, fishing, etc. The fifth one is protecting and preserving the land bounds and water biodiversity, environmental transportation or green transportation. So these are projects related to municipal and private transport, eco transport, hybrid transport, environmentally friendly railway transportation, creating infrastructure for such transport. The seventh one is water management and utilities, drinking water, water resources management, projects related to flood protection. Another one is climate change adaptation. Here we have usually the projects monitoring climate change, informational projects, and awareness raising on climate change. The ninth one is eco-efficient project technologies and processes. This includes projects related to environmental labeling, certification, distribution of green packaging. And last but not least is green buildings. Buildings that are compliant with regional or local standards. The National Commission recommends by its legal acts that each issuer adheres to certain principles of green bond. As I said, these are the principles that are internationally accepted and are taking into account the instructions of the international organizations like OSCE and IGMA and market participants, so that the issuers can streamline themselves so that the emission is successful. The Commission recommends to develop respective policies, so the issuing city develops a climate strategy and other strategies that would reflect environmental objectives and the principles of sustainable development in order to have a policy for risk management and environmental risk mitigation. So all those risks should be taken into account with this strategy, and if needed, the legal acts are amended accordingly in order to achieve the target indicators. Another stage is the selection of projects. So territories should select projects based on qualitative and quantitative indicators. Normally, there are certain principles in the international practices, in particular transparency of environmental factors, and so on. In our national legislation, it is envisaged that the government will approve the legal act governing the implementation of the project. But the essence of the principle is not changed. There should be a project with certain environmental features. There should be also a transparent
Місто розробило внутрішній порядок, яким чином буде
procedure for monitoring, and the municipality should develop a respective procedure. The fourth line is reporting that should reflect the legal framework, the law of Ukraine on assessment, environmental impact assessment, and it should be submitted quarterly or annually, depending on the principles of the issuer and the agreement with investor. And last but not least is independent verification. It should be in place so that the projects are assessed by an independent verifying entity. A third party is called in different countries in different manner, but the essence is the same. So an independent professional should assess if you have adhered to the principles of environmental sustainability and green development. The Commission also recommends to create a local or coordination group comprising experts from the ministries of infrastructure and environment, experts on the environmental sustainability, finance specialists, and those having experience with green bonds, legal experts, and usually this group is presided, because this is a group governing huge loans, is presided by a head of the group. After this group is formed, they can define the verifying authority. The Commission usually recommends major consultants on sustainable development. This can be non-financial rating agencies and consultants on sustainable development. Those can also be organs of global technical control and certification, or credit rating agencies, or the big four like Deloitte, Ernst & Young, KPMG, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And the essence is that an independent verificator is able to confirm that the projects are environmentally sustainable, and they can be implemented at the expense of those bonds. So the issue procedure is as follows. The city has created a coordination group and has defined an independent verifying authority. The respective documents, legal acts, internal strategy, information on the project is provided to the verifying entity, who shall confirm that its compliant with the requirements to the green bond, then it's agreed with the Ministry of Finance. We shall have here the representatives of the Ministry of Finance. They will tell in more detail. And after the emission, is prepared, contracts with underwriters and the National Bank are concluded. So all the documents necessary for the National Commission, needed for the National Commission to register the emission, and then the emission certificate or emission registration confirmation is issued. And after the issuer receives the funds, then the money is allocated to the funding of green projects, and the funds are received by the managers allocating those funds into investment projects, and the issuing body should pay interest on the bonds, and upon their expiry or maturity, refund the entire amount and a report on the implementation of the project and the remaining funds, if any. It was many times mentioned that Ukraine has experience in green bonds. I will not dwell on that, but looking at the changing situation, we can say that the trends are quite positive. Green bonds are an instrument requiring or allowing to involve green project funding. So globally, non-implemented projects were long-term, from 5 to 10 years. Usually, these are expensive projects with the issuance amounts over 100 million. Of course, there are projects lower than 100 million. For example, some countries issued sovereign bonds for 30 million. However, all the transactional costs preceding emission usually require a more specific approach, so you should select several projects, not one, in order to accumulate the resource to implement it. Of course, in the international practice, there are cases when, in order to decrease the coupon on bonds, there are several mechanisms. It can be a state guarantee, as it was made for Ukrenergo, or it can be assistance from the international banks that are facilitating the issuance of bonds in international currencies or foreign currencies, and it can be also due to the assistance of international organizations compensating the costs for certification or certain segments of the interest rate. The world also has a widespread practice for stimulating the markets of green bonds, and developed countries have facilitated their municipalities. In particular, in the United States, there was a program supporting municipalities. We had two programs. One program was aimed at subsidies, reducing the percentage of green bonds interest rate, and the other one was compensating the interest rate in terms of tax credits. There are also mechanisms stimulating green investments for central banks. For example, such experience was in place in the Chinese Republic. Some countries are stimulating certain segments. For example, in Brazil, projects on wind energy were stimulated. In particular, in India, there was a similar program aimed at the national parks. It supported the programs implemented in the polluted areas or landfills, and the organizations involved, in particular municipalities, underwent state registration, and it's more or less in line with the industrial parks that are working here. We believe that those stimulus packages are going to be implemented in Ukraine as well. The concept envisages implementation of the taxonomy of stimuli that Alexander Sushenko was referring to. And for each activity, there will be a separate taxonomy of environmental drawbacks. So this will be a regime that is quite a high in cost for international players. So systems like verification supports by institutions having experience or certain track record on the market, they will be able to assess independently, let's say, or verify. There will be national regulations on information revelation, and the first pilot project will be implemented after this forum together with OECD and our partners and other possible donors. And concepts envisages a register of projects. This means that the local project or national project of yours can be implemented at the expense of issuing sovereign bonds or green bonds. Also, international institutions will be involved to increase the quality of green bonds, and the government will help the local issuers. This is defined by the concept, and we expect that more detailed explanation will be provided at the expense of the main advantages. And green bonds enables to fund what the banks are not covering, and the institutions are not providing grants for the green bonds. And of course, the conditions of the green bond financing is usually a 5-year or a 7-year period. And the percentage that should be paid is quite high. For the green bonds, the percentage is much more favorable. And for subsequent issuance, the coupon is decreased because the issuers receive a premium with a lower level of risk of those bonds. And I will be happy. So that's it from my side. I will be happy to receive questions, and my contact details are also available. Thank you very much, Andriy. It's a very interesting presentation with a lot of questions. But there are other questions to be covered by our subsequent colleagues. So one of the key bodies forming the policy in this respect is the Ministry of Finance. And we wanted to give the floor to the Director of Department of Interbudgetary Relations. And we are very grateful for your time, because this is really a relevant question, and there is a need for funding, and this relates to the peculiarities of local borrowings. So, Mr. Alexander, if possible, please uncover this topic to us. Hello. Local self-government, at the stage of the reform, which is at the initial stage, being finalized at the end of the year 2020, new territorial communities were created as a part of the reform at that point. They had new powers, both in terms of expenditures and incomes, and we have new territories involving funding, and the budget resources that we have received are not covering the new territorial communities. So previously, all the residential areas had a local budget working for the development of this area, of this particular city. Now we have administrative units working for the administrative centers, but also for the entire territory with the adjacent smaller boroughs to this territorial community. So the need in funds, first and foremost for the development, are quite significant. And in principle, the year 2025 demonstrated a trend that bodies of local self-government have been involving credit resources for the realization of the new territorial communities. What are the new regulations for those borrowings, defining the parameters? This is a budget code regulating the core moments and establishing the local self-government, let's say, framework of work for borrowings. The right for borrowings at this point is given to the local councils and internal borrowings at the internal market, and external borrowings can involve credit resources of international organizations, and the right is enjoyed by the regional councils and local territorial communities, and other external borrowings are the prerogative of the city of Kiev and the city of Sevastopol, and local territorial communities with the center at the regional level. So today, according to our budget legislation, we have a limitation in terms of not all territorial communities having access to credit resources, and this question has been raised at the level of the Parliament in terms of broadening the mandate for local borrowings, not just by local territorial communities, but also other territorial communities. So these changes were not introduced, but this question is highly relevant, and we will consider it, and the main criteria is the possibility of those communities to receive credit resources, and we are aware that the attraction of credit resources to the budget is quite an rightful step, but in terms of the state's position, we should be aware that those resources are going to be compensated, because this is the image of the state, because if any territorial community involves resources, there will be problems in terms of the attitude of investors, not just to this community, but in general to the state of Ukraine. So we are studying this matter, and in subsequent years we hope for the changes to be introduced, and in the majority, green bonds are usually external borrowings, because the investor, as a rule, would like to be more competitive, but representatives of the banking sector have confirmed that the issuance of those bonds can be exercised at the Ukrainian market, and local territorial communities can also be involved. What is the procedure for subsequent actions, and how the approval process happens for those borrowings? So it has been regulated by the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers from the 16th of February 2010. So it defines the procedure for borrowing by the local self-government authorities. I will not list the documents that are submitted to the Ministry of Finance, and speaking of those documents, there are a number of papers to be submitted to the Ministry of Finance. It is financial and budgetary reporting on the local budget. These are the drafts of respective resolutions with the conditions stated for the borrowings, and calculations of the substantiation of this borrowing. The Ministry of Finance elaborates on those documents, and on the result of their consideration issues a conclusion that is basic for the local self-government bodies to involve loans for the local budget. At present, the code has certain limitations in terms of budgetary parameters that are enabling the local self-government body to attract credit resources. So these are the two limitations. One is concerning the norm of allocating funds for servicing the debt obligations involved by the state and the local self-government body, not just green bonds, but also guarantee obligations and credit resources to 10% of the general fund and other parameters envisaged by the code controlled by the Ministry of Finance during consideration of those documents. So these are the parameters related to the scope of financial resources of the entire community. This year, changes to the budget code have been introduced, which relates to the finalization of the current fiscal period, and from the 1st of January, changes to the budget code are going to be introduced, where the ceiling of the debt is going to be defined based on the actual borrowings from the previous years to the general fund, not taking into account the personal income tax on those territories. If we compare nominally them to the indicators existing today, these are the forecast receivables. So these are the same indicators, and this scheme is more clear and understandable because the forecast receivables are encompassing the funds going to the general fund of the local budgets to be transferred to the development budget. So these are the core aspects and normative acts related to approval of those borrowings. At present, the war started on the 24th of February, has significantly impacted the life of each resident of the country and the territorial communities, because most of them have suffered certain losses, and the question of resource support, and taking into account that green bonds have certain prerogatives and they can be involved at a more favorable basis, on a more favorable condition for the municipalities. And the core thing that is necessary today is to finish the work so that we can involve those funds to develop the communities. Thank you. I'm open for questions. Thank you, Alexander. Indeed, everybody waiting not just for the end of war, but for our victory as well. And thank you so much for this profound presentation. The position of the Minister of Finance is one of the definitive ones. So should we have questions, we can make some homework. If you have other commitments, we can make good note of the questions and present them later.
Speaker,
Our next speaker is Victoria Gnatovska, acting Director of the Directorate for Energy and Resource Efficient Policy Formation of the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine. I know that Victoria has
Багато особистих зусиль
personally committed much to approval of the concept of green bonds at the government. So thank you for joining. The floor is yours. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. In the name of the ministry, I would like to greet everyone present at the forum today after the profound speech of Andrei Frolov. It's hard to add anything because this is a person involved in the drafting of green bonds, and the Ministry of Energy in general has approached us for contributing to developing of this document. And after the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation, this topic has become much more relevant, and cities have been damaged, not just those in the area of warfare, also objects of energy infrastructure, and the cities on the whole territory of Ukraine. And obviously, these are huge damages for the state, and these are in billions, and apparently reconstruction of energy objects and the infrastructure in general should be exercised based on environmental principles, so reconstruction should be based on energy efficiency, and this should be based on a significant amount of financial resources and international practices, best practices, and this problem can be resolved by green finance, though I can say that green bond concept that Andrei Frolov and me were involved into, it was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers before the war. So this trend on green finance in particular and reform of Ukraine in general was felt earlier, and it was high on the agenda. It has become high on the agenda today, but it was before. So this year the concept was approved, and a number of activities were defined to support this sector in Ukraine. And Andrei has rightfully mentioned that there are companies successfully involved in those mechanisms. Ukrenergo, for example, $825 million on the international market. And I think that we have to make every effort that this financial instrument is relevant for all the market players, in particular municipalities. I am aware that the last week we had an activity with heads of municipalities, and they were saying that they need instruments for reforming their cities, making them more energy efficient, not just in terms of reconstruction, but we are saying that cities should be energy independent and include certain instruments for accumulation of energy and distribution of generation. And as it's in fashion to say now, creation of energy islands is needed due to aggression of the Russian Federation, and it's not always positive that the impact of them is at this point, and in this situation it would be helpful for the cities and for the state in general. I would like to say that the next step after approving the concept of international obligation, we are preparing the proposals to the Ministry of Energy, and we are defining the organizational measures, and they would enable the issuers and other market participants. I think that within the framework of this forum, these ideas are being generated, and the Ministry of Energy is ready to discuss those initiatives, allowing to make those obligations more interesting to the investors. In particular, we are ready for the action plans in the implementation of those concepts, which are a basic document. And I would like to say that I would like to thank everyone for their attention. I think it's really relevant. And I think that subsequently we're going to cooperate with all the stakeholders on this matter, including the ministries that are key in the implementation of this mechanism. Thank you. Victoria, thank you very much for your contribution and for your constant support and cooperation. And I hope that in the nearest future, the government is going to approve an action plan which will distribute the roles and who's going to do what. And the market of green bonds will be entered by our energy giants and companies involving green finance. Thank you so much. And the next and last but not least speaker is Viktor Bukovinsky, Director of Department of Strategic Planning and Environmental Restoration. Viktor is knowledgeable of the projects and support of the projects, and will dwell on the approval process of the decree of the government and instructions for municipalities in the selection of environmental projects. Thank you so much. I would like to reformat our modality today because it relates to green finance, and I would like to remind everyone that Ukraine signed an agreement with the EU and involved a financial instrument called LIFE. This is Environmental Action Program. In September last year, the Parliament ratified this agreement, and representatives of Ukraine received a full-scale possibility to participate in those programs. The Ministry of Environment is trying to raise informational awareness, and in such a manner, as a result of all the calls of the European Union last week, a committee session was conducted within the framework of LIFE, and Ukraine has gained a segment in all the projects submitted for competition, making up almost 10%, which is not a bad result for the beginning. I would like to say that the LIFE program related to green funding is targeted at nature preservation and biodiversity, prevention and adaptation to climate change, circular economy, and transition to alternative energy sources. In this year, all the calls have expired, so all the proposals have been processed by the EU, and next year, new proposals will be accepted, and those interested would benefit from providing their proposals and actively participating. So the LIFE program is intended till 2025. So there is a scope for participation. There is 5 million euros. So please feel free to contribute. Regarding the contribution of the First Deputy Minister Grishan, he mentioned the creation of the environmental fund, and I can see a question in the chat on that. I will try to briefly outline what the fund is about. The Ministry of Environmental Protection is now studying international experience on the creation of a national environmental fund in Ukraine. We have certain deliverables, certain positions, and on the 24th of November, I have presented this concept in Brussels. It was very positively received, and I hope we are in a right pipeline. This fund is aimed at funding of long-term environmental projects and going beyond the financial year. The creation of the fund will enable the creation of a unified administrator and monitoring and control of the efficiency of the implementation of those activities. Monitoring and control is going beyond the targeted use of those funds and adding monitoring of environmental objectives implementation. What is the essence of the reform that is planned in ecofinance? This is first and foremost the earmarking of funds that are targeted for environmental safety and accumulation of those costs in order for their targeted use. The insurance of targeted control over their use, and that's probably it because it's going to be long. What is the structure of this fund? It's a direct subordination to the government. The structure of the fund will comprise executive directorate and a supervision board and regional departments of the fund. So we are aware that the concentration of this work in the center will decrease the efficiency. So we are approaching the regions. Regarding the sources for the fund, we are planning to allocate environmental levies there and payments for the use of natural resources, donor funding, international financial organizations, and so on. And as of today, we're planning to make this fund an administrator of the issuance of green bonds. The funding forms is direct loans, funding of nature protection activities, co-funding, such as LIFE, and we're planning that the fund is able to perform this function. Also, we plan to compensate percentage for the loans. So it's that's it, to be brief. And regarding the procedure for the selection of projects that are planned to be implemented at the expense of the funding, the Ministry of Environmental Protection has elaborated on a number of those procedures, and we are planning to conduct a public discussion of one of them on the website. I have some concerns of over-regulation of this process in subsequent consideration. So our objective is to make it as convenient and accessible and transparent and avoids any threshold. So I invite everyone for the discussion of this project when it is published. We're going to announce when we are going to do that on the social media, because each stakeholder's opinion matters, because this mechanism should become very functional. Thank you for your attention. Please feel free to address me for any. Thank you, Victor. If possible, stay with us for a couple of questions on the live program. So I'm interested if municipalities can participate directly. And what is the procedure for the submission of applications? Should it be directly to the ministries or aggregated? No, the applications are submitted directly to the commission of the LIFE project in some conditions if the tender requirements envisaged. So the ministry can provide letters of support. For some tenders, letters of support are needed, so we issue them in English for the stakeholders. To maximize the convenience, I would like to remind that live projects are submitted in English, and there are a lot of questions on translation. Apologies.
Будь ласка, не користуйтесь ліфтом. Так, прошу вибачити на...
Apologies. It's a strike warning.
Пустіться в укриття. Повітряна тривога.
Я думаю, що тоді,
I think that, Mr. Victor, we will let you go.
Якраз тривога почалась, але в нас і порядок денний сьогодні по виступам майже
We have practically expired our agenda. I had a couple of questions on green bonds, but I think we can clarify that in working order.
Я думаю, що будемо співпрацювати, оскільки треба вже...
Yes, I think we're going to cooperate because we need to elaborate this mechanism. I'm interested how the National Environmental Fund can help in terms of green bonds and how it could be interesting for the potential issues. Anyways, thank you so much for this productive contribution. I think we have no questions at this stage, and we are expecting Nadia Rizanova, representative of GFA, of International Financial Corporation, IFC. Nadia, do you have any contributions? Thank you. I cannot put my camera on because my connection is not so good. The organization of this forum is very positive because the funding of green projects by the bond is an essential instrument for the local government. We are facing a lot of work, and I will be, that's it, that's my contribution. Will be brief because there is an airstrike warning. So taking into account this force majeure, I think we're going to crown the meeting, and summing up this forum, I would like to thank all speakers and all the participants for their attention, and especially the Association of Teachers. Alexander Sloboshenko is our partner in the work on this project, and a progressive manager aware that this is the future and this world trend is going to fill in the world financial market. I will draw the conclusions of the forum. The problematic aspects that I have noted for myself include the question of broadening the mandate that the Ministry of Finance representative has mentioned, and profit taxation, because state bonds are not taxed and private are taxed, and it should be unified, because otherwise the market is not going to be competitive, because the green bonds are not just commerce, it's not investment business, it's social and environmental responsibility. And I'm trying to go over through my notes. Among the questions requiring regulation today is the approval of the procedure for supervision of environmental projects and funded at the expense of the local and central budget. This is what Mr. Gorchanik referred to. Second is to envisage a mechanism foreseen by the concept for the introduction of the green bonds market for stimulating this market. And I think we should follow the best practices and envisage certain stimuli both for the issuers and investors investing into green bonds. Third question is that is not regulated is the question of verification, because we at this point don't have a legal definition for verifiers, how they are selected, accredited, and so on. So recommendations of the National Commission on bonds and treasuries, I think that the Ministry of Environment, in the process of work on the procedure, can take into account this question and make it as transparent as possible, because if it's gonna be a transparent and understandable procedure for the selection of verifiers, it can expand the possibilities for the issuers on the market. And number 4, it is clear that the local self-government lacks knowledge and specialists that could at the basic level involve the legislation provisions or international practices. So we need to prepare some recommendations together with the Association of the Cities for the local self-government bodies, so that they could start working on future projects, because looking at our legislation being in process of development, we should orient on international norms for implementing the European legislation into Ukrainian legislation. So in principle, these are the baselines for the whole world, so we can start working, and I think we can support the preparation of the pilot projects on issuance of green bonds by the municipalities, especially those having had experience of local borrowings through green bonds. I think that we need to remove all the factors constraining local self-government and the market from the development and the use of such a mechanism. It's clear that one of the factors is the war, but we all hope for victory and hope for recovery, and we are aware that we can reconstruct Ukraine with the modern instruments. I think that when we organize the first project on issuing green bonds, it can have multiplication effect And everybody shall want to make good use of it, of this instrument, and it will improve the investment attractiveness and business climate in the country. Due to the airstrike warning, we apologize for finishing the forum earlier. The outcomes of this forum will be shared together with the Association of the Cities, and we will present them to the governmental bodies responsible for the development of this market and send them to all the stakeholders and all the municipalities. If you have any questions, please send them to our email or to the Association of the Cities, and we will try to give you a profound answer. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear speakers. Thank you, dear audience, and see you soon. And I hope to see you in the nearest future, together with the other financial instruments, because it's not just the green bonds developing in the world, but also the social ones. Thank you once again. Let's make it a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.